All right, so in this webinar, we're going to be talking about sibling conflict, and I'm sharing my screen again with you so that you can see the PowerPoint. What I want to do here is welcome members in particular, because members are the people who pay $25 a month and they have access to the webinar library. And the webinar library contains all of the webinars, including this one. So if you want to view this after the fact, it's in the members library if you're interested. I'm also writing a book called 10 Traits of a Successful Family right now. And this is a fun book because it looks at the family as a whole. And some of the ideas that I'm sharing or learning about sibling conflict are found right here in this particular webinar, and they're going to be in this book. So if you're interested in that book, you can go to our website, biblicalparenting.org, and you can request to be part of the Facebook group that's getting previews of the book on a monthly basis. So if that interests you, please check it out. Would love to have you be part of that. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk strategy. I want to give you a plan for addressing sibling conflict. This is for young people as well as parents, and you'll have time to ask me questions in about a half hour. In the meantime, I'm not looking at the question answer block right now. I'm just looking at the PowerPoint like you are, and I'm teaching from this to help you move forward. You'll see on the that the first thing I want to do is I want to share with you some scripture, because I think the scripture is powerful and enlightening when it comes to addressing sibling conflict. Romans 14:19 says this: "Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification." The important thing I want to point out in this verse is that peace is only one of the goals. If, as a family, your goal is peace, then you're likely to miss out on harmony in your home. The reason I say that is because it's not good enough to just have peace. And many parents focus on peace by saying, would you stop fighting, stop being mean, stop bickering, stop touching each other. It's all this, don't do these kinds of things so that we can have peace. Peace is good, but that's only one part of the solution. The other part mentioned in Romans 14:19 has to do with mutual edification. In other words, it's not just stopping something, but it's adding something. We must teach our children and us as adults that we have an obligation to be edifying others. To edify means to build up as opposed to tear down. Sibling conflict tears down, we want to build up, and so Romans 14:19 gives us a more complete picture that we have both of those, not just peace, but also mutual edification. A second verse is Romans 15:1 and 2. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Now in sibling conflict, a person who is bickering with someone else or making cutting remarks or getting angry or grabbing the toy or whatever it is pleasing themselves. This passage talks about bearing with the failings of the weak. There's a misconception that people have that anger is a sign of strength. And so I'm angry, I'm going to grab it from you. That is a sign of weakness, which we'll talk about in a few moments. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak. So bearing with the failings of the weak means that you listen more. You're more patient. You don't interrupt someone. You don't complain. You're not so easily irritated by someone else who's being annoying. That you're able to work with another person in the family, that's a sign of strength. So building strength is important, and we're going to talk about that more in the practical part of this webinar. It continues by saying each of us should please our neighbors for their good to build them up. Again, we have that word edifying. Our goal is to build somebody else up, not just to please ourselves. Another scripture that's helpful is 2 Corinthians 10:8. So even if I boast, now this is Paul talking about his kind of defense of his apostleship. And he says, so even if I boast somewhat freely about the authority the Lord gave us for doing what? Building you up rather than tearing you down. I will not be ashamed of it. And that is our goal too. We're not tearing people down, we're building them up. And so if you've got a problem in your home with someone tearing someone down, then they're missing out on something really important, and they don't need to just practice stopping tearing down, they must practice building up. Part of that's going to happen with words, and that's why I like Ephesians 4:29, which says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Notice, according to their needs, we're thinking about the other person so we can benefit them. We're building others up. That is the antidote to sibling conflict. And that's what's going to produce harmony when we start building others up and not thinking of ourselves. Now, I'm going to take you on a 9-step process. This process will guide you through a plan for building sibling harmony in your home. And I want to lay it out for you so you can understand it and see what it looks like one step at a time. I want to explain each step. Step number one is to map your family. This is going to help you see where the problems exist. I do this in counseling, and I have a family come into my office. Let's say we have a dad and a mom and a child number one, child number two, and child number three. All of them are in my office, and or maybe I'm just dealing with dad and mom. But what I'm trying to do is map out the family. So I'll draw lines between circles. These lines represent the relationship between the dad and the child number one, or the dad and child number three. All relationships have a line between them. Then I ask the question of the people that I'm working with. Sometimes I have the whole family in there, and I ask, what is the conflict level that exists between these different pairs? What's the conflict level between dad and mom? So in this case, one is low conflict, but mom and child number one have a high conflict. That's a 3. And I go around each one. What about dad and child number one? Well, that's a 2. So you can see the numbers represent the lines. On the lines represent the level of conflict that we see. So I'm mapping out the family. What this does for me as a counselor is it helps me identify the specific weaknesses in the family. Where does tension exist? Where is conflict high in the relationships? Now, in particular, I'm interested in a person who's generating or being a part of a number of pieces of conflict. So in this map, if you look at this map of a family, you'll see that child number one has high conflict with child number two, with child number three, medium conflict with dad, high conflict with mom. So with 4 other people in the family, everything's a 3 or a 2. As opposed to looking at child number, let's look at child number 3. We have a 1, a 2, and a 3, and a 2. Child number 2, we have a 2, and a 1, and a 2, and a 3. So you see, what I can do from this is I can measure the conflict that exists in certain relationships. That's going to draw your attention to pairs. Those pairs then become important. Or in this case, because child number one seems to have a lot of challenges with other people, I suspect that child number one has some work to do. You might not even have to map out your family to know who child number one is in your home. But the point is, when you map out the family, it's helpful. I like to do it with the whole family present, because what that does is the child number one's looking at that and saying, whoa, I do have a problem. Or in many cases, child number one says, well, it's everybody else's fault. Child number two does this to me. Child number three says that to me, and so on. And so over time, I'm trying to help that child see that, well, you probably can learn some skills to deal with all those people instead of feeling like a victim in your home. One of the problems that children experience who are high in this conflict area in a home. So the first thing you want to do is map out your family so that you have a plan. Now, you're probably already thinking about questions you want to ask me, and I encourage you to take your questions, put them in the question answer box below, because as soon as I get done sharing with you in about 20 minutes or so, I am going to start addressing some of those questions that you have based on the things I've shared, or questions about your own family, what you'd like to talk about in regards to this particular issue. So if you have questions, you can start putting them there. But I'm not going to address your questions at the moment. I want to keep moving through this plan. So far, we've talked about step number one, map out your family. The second thing we want to do is we want to work with children individually. Let me explain to you why that's so important. Step number two, to work on things with each child, is because it'll help us to deal with the different parts that child deals with. When you hear the statement, and you probably hear this statement in your home if you have more than one child, that's not fair. We're not interested in what's just not fair here, because our children have this perception that fair means equal. We are not treating everybody equally in this home. That needs to be laid out. We're not trying to do that. If you're trying to do that, you're creating competition and comparison, because what children like to do is they like to count the sprinkles on the cupcake, or they want to make sure that they've got the same thing that you gave the other person, or whatever. So that's not fair. It's not acceptable. God doesn't treat us fairly. That is, he doesn't treat us equally. He gives us what we need. In parable about some, he gives 5 talents, some 2 talents, some 1 talent. Why? Because that's the faith that person has. So the words "that's not fair" are not appropriate, and working with children individually help us address that child's uniqueness, because each child must learn to deal with the other's selfishness. It's not a group thing that we're working on here. It will get much further in the sibling conflict solutions if we'll work with the child individually, because child number one or child number two has some particular challenges as they relate to the other people in the home and their selfishness. And they have their own selfishness that they need to deal with as well. So every child needs a unique plan. Every child has different needs. So as we develop that plan with each child, we're much more effective than we are trying to do this together. I have twins, and I have 5 children actually, but 2 of them are twins. And if I try to challenge the twins together, I remember that they would back up each other. I mean, they were arguing a minute ago, and now they're defending each other, and I'm the odd man out. It can be true with any relationship. They don't have to be twins, but you want to work with children individually to maximize the change that you want to take place in your home. Child number 1 has particular challenges that need to be addressed personally, and child number 2 does as well. So an individual plan is going to work to help make the change. Let's go to step number 3. Step number 3 is to define strength for children. I alluded to this a little bit as I was reading the scripture, but as we define strength, we need to realize that sibling conflict reveals personal weaknesses. If you're a young person listening to what I'm saying and you continually get into conflict with your brother or sister, that tells me something important about you. It tells me that you aren't equipped to handle the challenges that are presented by your brother. And you might say, well, you don't know my brother. I don't know your brother, but I know that God placed your brother or sister in your home for a reason. Probably that reason is for you, so that you could build the skills necessary to deal with an annoying brother or someone who is mean to you. You've got to have a plan for dealing with that. And if you have the strength to be able to deal with that other person, you'll go much further in life. In fact, you'll likely look back on these days and say, wow, I had an annoying brother. Now I'm working with this person in the office, and this person's annoying. I'm sure glad I had an annoying brother, and I learned how to develop some strength to deal with that. That's what you want. That's what happens in sibling conflict, that you recognize your own personal weaknesses, and then you're able to develop strengths to deal with that other person. God has a plan for every person in a home. He brings people into homes through adoption. He brings them in through foster care. He brings them into home through biological birth. But God brings those people into a home for a reason, and it's an opportunity for each of us to develop strengths to deal with those other people in the home. Also, we see that strength doesn't retaliate. If you are in the habit of, well, he did this, so I did that, that's not strength, that's weakness. We want to develop an understanding of strength so that young people realize that the person who is patient or tolerant is the person who's strong. The person who's strong lets other people win or go first or have the best piece. That's what real strength is. In fact, Jesus taught us when the 2 boys wanted to get the best seat, they ran to Jesus and they said, could one of us sit on your left and one sit on your right? Just like kids do today. They want the best seat. And Jesus said, the best seat is not for me to give. That's up to the Father. It turned out later that the other disciples heard that James and John wanted the best seat. This is in Mark chapter 10. And they were indignant, the Bible says. Why do you think they were indignant? Because they wanted the best seat. And so Jesus says that the person who wants to be great in my kingdom learns to be the servant of all. That's the strength. If we can learn to be a servant, if we can learn to let others go first, and we can be kind to other people, that is strength. When we understand strength, it really helps us move forward. So we're going to take a child who's having a particular problem now in sibling conflict. We're going to get together with that child independently. We're going to basically say, we can't live this way anymore. And so I want you to understand that you have an area of weakness, I can tell, with your brother. Oh, yeah, I know. He's annoying. You're right. He's certified annoying. Okay, I agree with you. He's annoying. But your response to him is really important. And it looks to me like you don't have the required skills to deal with an annoying brother. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you to get stronger in this particular area of your life. And here's how we define strength for you. And you want to define the strength for this child particular, so the child understands that strength and what it looks like. The next step in our plan then is to explain the partnership, because that's what it is. The parents are not going to partner with each child independently. And parents are going to point out when they see a weakness. They're going to come alongside that child and say, hey, you got a problem here. We need to work on this. And so you want to explain this partnership to a child. I would explain the partnership using these kinds of words. I'm going to help you be strong. If I see weakness, I'm going to point it out. I'm going to call you out of the playroom or the bedroom or the hall or the bathroom or wherever you are. And I'm going to work with you in that moment to train you to be stronger by developing a plan to give you some ideas about doing that. I'm your coach. I'm going to send you back in to try to help you do better. That attitude as parents working with kids is strategic because it helps kids to respond better to the challenges that they face. That's the overall plan. We're explaining the partnership, but let's drill down a little bit more by going to step number 5. Step number 5 is going to name the target quality for a particular child. This is why it's so important to work on this individually. Every child needs a plan. Every child needs a target heart quality to work on. In order for us to develop that target quality, we have to know what it is. We want to name that target quality for the child. And so let's talk about what that's going to look like. I would suggest that you're going to develop a unique definition of that quality for the child you're working with. And so it's going to be individualized. Let me give you some example. Patience is waiting without complaining or whining. If you see 2 kids playing a game and one's playing on the iPad and the other needs to wait, complaining is the temptation. Oh, there's a way to challenge a brother who's using his turn longer than he should on the iPad or should be sharing the iPad, but complaining or whining are not appropriate. So we want to be patient, but then we need to know how to take initiative. So maybe the initiative is the opposite of this, initiative is knowing how to respond in a way that challenges the person, but still edifying. Instead of not putting the person down, we're building them up, but we're initiating. So some children need to know how to initiate well. That's another quality. Or maybe we say self-control. Self-control is using words, not hands, to help someone else play a game. So I was playing a game with a couple boys. One was 12 and the other was 9. And the 12-year-old liked to use his hands to communicate to the 9-year-old how to play the game. I said, no, hands are out of bounds. You can't. He reaches his hands, I slap his hand away. No hands. Forcing him to use words, not hands. That was a challenge for him. He had to develop self-control to use words instead of hands. You see what I'm doing, though? I'm defining the quality specific for the child that you're working with. Self-control might mean something different for another child, but this child, that's a specific way to define it. Tolerance, you might define as putting up with annoying behavior without reacting. Tolerant. Or peace is not reacting with put-downs or sarcasm when provoked. Is that ability to remain at peace even when I'm challenged in that particular area. Now, those are target qualities, and every child should have one they're working on. We show you in our resources, I'll point out some of our resources in a bit, but we show you how to develop a whole plan for children. But every child should have something they're working on. After all, God has things he's working on in our lives. And a child should know what that is. This isn't a hidden plan. Every child should know what's going on and what should be happening in his situation. Let's go to step number 6, and that is to create a written plan now. We've defined the target quality, and we're going to create a written plan. Now, when I say develop this written plan, I want you to understand that this is a written plan for the child. I'm trying to give you an overall plan for the parent. Here's how you identify the quality, work with the child, say we're not going to live this way anymore, or you're going to partner with the child. That's all the parent plan. Now we're working on a written plan for the child. I would suggest there are some helpful rules or guidelines for developing the written plan. And number 1 is the child writes the list, not the parent. So you want the child writing down the list. You can give him ideas, but he needs to write down the things on the list that he's going to do or say in order to, when he's faced with the challenge of the annoying brother, or when his brother does something that's wrong, or comes into his room when he doesn't want him to, or takes a CD without asking. What are you going to do in that situation? So maybe it's 2 lists. One list of things to do and the other for things to say. The reason we want, these are things to say to yourself. These are the meditations you have in your heart, because kids often will say things in their heart that are inappropriate. Things like, it's so unfair, my brother gets everything, mom always picking on me. Those are things kids say in their hearts. And when sibling conflict comes along, they'll say something like, well, he was annoying, that's why I punched him. In other words, they're saying to themselves, my punching him was justified because he was annoying. children say those kinds of things inside their hearts. Now, Psalm 19:14 is a great verse for dealing with sibling conflict or any change in any person's life. It says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer." Notice it's not only the words that come out of the mouth, that's the things I do. Another list for things I say, that's the meditations of my heart. So the things I say to my heart are the meditations of my heart. Those are things I say to myself. And the things I do are the things that, the unkind words or the ways I use my hands or my feet or my eyes or my voice. The things a person does and the things they say are important, say to themselves are important. And so the psalmist is saying in that passage, Lord, let the words that come out of my mouth, the things I do, my hands, everything, all those, but also the things I say in my heart, be pleasing to you. We want to help children know what they should be saying in their hearts, because it's the hearts where things change. If we can help children make change on the inside, it'll affect the way they respond outwardly. Now, this list becomes important, but the list doesn't change a person. It does give them ideas, and if you have ideas, you can go add, you can suggest the ideas, but the child really needs to choose things that are going to be on the list. When you then are correcting children, refer back to the list. You might say to a child, okay, you need to go sit in the hall, take your list. I want you to look at the list and tell me what you could have done in that situation, or maybe the list isn't complete yet. We need to add something new to handle this particular situation. This is a dynamic list that's changing, but it's a list the child has somewhere. Maybe he keeps it in his bedroom, by his bed. And so when he goes and sits on his bed, he pulls out the list, he looks at it, but this is the child's list. The child's created the list, and the child knows where to keep it. Because this is a list that's part of the coaching process. This is the tool that's helping children to change. So this plan is a child's plan, the written plan, not the parent's plan, the child's plan. The child's making the list, the child's coming up with solutions, and the parent's coaching the child to do this. That doesn't, I'm not suggesting that it's optional. You might say to your child, look, you need to go sit down and take a break, and before you come back, you need to have two things on your list that are going to help you deal with your brother when he does these things to you, so you're not reacting the way you did. So firmness is important, but it's a child creating the list. Let's go on to the next step in our 9-step process. And that is to practice the right responses. Now that means that if you're the parent and you're working with children, you're going to do this coaching. Remember, we talked about explaining the partnership in step number 4, which is this coaching relationship. And now we're talking about practicing, because coaching always implies practice. You want your children practicing together. That means you want them engaged. Some parents will say, oh, you guys, you can't play together. One goes to one corner, the other goes to the other corner, and you can't play together. That's one mistake I think parents make. The other mistake is they say to kids, you guys fight it out, let me know who wins. And they just let them go at it. And I think both of those are mistakes. I think what we want to do is monitor their play, and we want to teach them by training them, by having them practice doing the right thing. Let's talk about what that means. If we're going to practice, it means that sibling interaction is now practice time. It means you want to be close by, you want to monitor the interaction so that you can catch it early. If we can catch it early or catch it coming on, it's a great time to take action. But your action is very important, what you do when you see it coming on. When you see it coming on, even before it takes place, I would suggest that you want to do something at that moment. You're going to call the child out. But even before we go there. If you see your child doing the right thing, listening to his brother, giving in, letting someone else have the first turn, I would encourage you right away, call the child out to offer affirmation. Son, you are contributing to being a peacemaker with your brother. I just saw in a situation where sometimes you get angry, but you didn't do that this time. What was your secret to success? Kids often don't know, but if you ask them, it's amazing what kids say. Oh, I just wanted to continue playing the game without having a problem. Oh, well, that's a good thing to say to yourself. Maybe add that to your plan later. Okay, because you said something to yourself in that moment that worked. Call the child out for affirmation. That affirmation is going to affirm the child, to encourage them, provide them with hope so that they can move in the right direction. But invariably, you're going to see a child do the wrong thing. So when you do, you're going to call the child out to correct them. When you do, go to the plan. Let's look at the plan, and let's see how the plan fits into this scenario. Does it have a solution there that fits into the plan? If so, I'd like you to take the idea, tell me what it is, and I'm going to send you back into practice. I want you to go back in and do the same thing. See if you can solve the problem this time when your brother takes the Lego away from you that you want. What's your part? What's the plan that you're going to use to deal with that challenge that you have? So we send them back in to practice. Now, typically children will say something like, what about him? How come you're not punishing him? Or just, I'm saying, this isn't punishment. This is training. I am training him. You go in there and do the right thing, and I'm watching, because if he's doing the wrong thing, I'm going to pull him out. I don't need to pull him out yet, because you need him to do the wrong thing so you can practice doing the right thing here. So I'll bring him out in a minute. You show me you're doing the right thing. I'm going to be watching, and when he does the wrong thing, if you're doing the right thing, I'm pulling him out, and I'm going to train him, and I'm going to send him back in to do the right thing. So all I'm suggesting is that these are practice sessions. This is strategy here. So we're going to use sibling interaction as our practice times. We're going to monitor it closely. We're going to give affirmation when we see something good, and we're going to use correction times to coach. Refer back to the plan and go back into practice. If a child's having trouble with that, then we may need some greater correction for that child, which is our next step. So we're going to correct strategically. And so this is correction that isn't just blowing up, like, oh, you guys, and how we do sometimes. We get so upset with our kids, and that changes the focus away from the child's problem, and now we got an upset parent at the same time. We want to keep the problem the child's problem. So let's not get sidetracked here. Let's try to keep it going for the child. Here's some ideas about doing that. Number one, don't overreact to failure. When you see the problem happening, you want to remain calm, call the child out, do what you need to do. And I would even refer to this as a huddle. I'm not calling you out to punish you. Hey, we need a huddle. Come on out here. That's a coaching word. So calling a child out, it's a more positive idea. So we're coming out to debrief a little bit. Now, the child might be high on the emotions side at this moment. It might be hard to have a huddle. If that's the case, then you want to require a break to settle down. Well, I don't think we can talk about this yet. I know this is upsetting, and your brother is doing the wrong thing here, and I can give you some ideas to help here. But before I work with you on this, you can't be yelling at me like that. So you need to go sit in the hall, settle down, change your heart, come back and see me when you're ready. You come back, then we're going to resume the huddle, have the child develop a plan, send them back in to practice again. So the huddle is important, but sometimes we need a break. We're going to then revisit the plan when the child comes back from the break because maybe our plan isn't adequate. I mean, sometimes siblings are complicated people, and they irritate us in ways that are hard to have a solution for. But here's the interesting thing about sibling conflict, that it's a temptation for children to react. And the temptation that a child has to react is the same temptation that every other person has. You as a parent have temptations to react to an annoying person, whether that's the same child that your son's having trouble with, or to someone else in the family, or to your sibling, or to other people. We all have this, and that's because God tells us in 1 Corinthians 10:13, there is no temptation taken us but such that is common to man. The same problems that your children have in dealing with their brothers and sisters are the same problems you have, the same temptations anyway. But you have a plan for dealing with those temptations. So when someone's annoying you or irritating you, you have a plan, hopefully, to deal with that. Your children just need a plan. If they have a plan, good things can happen. So what you want to do after you revisit the plan, then you want to send the child back into the situation to practice a better response. The rest part of the verse, I just want to point this out to you young people. It says this is 1 Corinthians 10:13. You can look it up and read it while I quote it. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, there's no temptation taken us, but such that is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow us to be tempted more than what we are able, but will with the temptation also provide a way of escape. That's not so you can run away. The last part of the verse says, so you can bear up under it. So that you can stay in there with an annoying brother and do the right thing, because you'll be equipped with a plan, because God gives you the solution to face the temptation that's present in your life. Oh, it's amazing when we look at sibling conflict as an opportunity to grow spiritually and to get closer to God. Amazing things happen inside of our heart. So think about what God might do in your own life as you're working with this brother or sister that may be a challenge for you. You can be stronger in your own life. As we look at the 9 different parts, notice we're defining strength in number 3. And we want to define that strength in a way that helps us to recognize we are growing, and sibling challenges are a way for us to grow personally. God wants to give us opportunities to grow spiritually, and we want to practice what that looks like in those relationships. Step number 9 is to affirm progress. When I say, parents, when you are looking to affirm progress, or even if you're an older brother or sister and your sibling tends to be irritating or tease you or whatever, you want to point out when they're doing well. Catch kids doing the right thing. This is the most effective way to bring about change. You know, I like it that you didn't come up and just start punching me to get my attention that time. You came up and said my name. I really like that. That is affirming a person. You know, one of the greatest things that I help, if I can get a family together and I can help the siblings help each other address the sibling challenges, that is often more powerful than the parents working with the kids. So if you're a young person listening to this, you can be on a mission of being a peacemaker in your home. You can start developing some real important skills in your life to be able to manage those things strategically. So think about that as you're working with your siblings. You want to praise before the conflict starts. So if you see your kids playing well together, it only has a limited life. You know that conflict will eventually start. And so you want to praise them when they're doing well. You might come in and say, you know, I can tell you're both trying hard here to work together. In that case, we're praising them together, but we're giving them some affirmation together. And I think that's a great way to do it. So praise them before the conflict starts. And certainly if you see kids moving toward the goal, you want to praise them. That I see you're developing tolerance. I see that you're developing patience. It's hard to be in your situation where you're playing with your brother and sometimes he does those things. I understand that. And I can see that you're growing in some important ways. Well, those are 9 ways to affirm, 9-step process, I think, that you can work on to address sibling conflict. And maybe that'll help you as you're trying to address the challenges in your home. By the way, I'd be interested to know your thoughts about this webinar, if it was helpful for you or not. My email address is scott@biblicalparenting.org. If you're inclined, if you just shoot me an email and give me a report of your thoughts about this, I'd really appreciate that. It would just help me to know as I plan and maybe you have an idea of things that have worked for you that I could share with others. I'd appreciate that as well. Let me share with you, before I take some questions, let me share with you some of our resources. This diagram is a complete list of our 8 lines of curriculum. And the material I've used today to draw upon to provide you with solutions comes in part from the number 4 down, well, I guess I can't point for you, but 4 down on the bottom, the Motivate Your Child Action Plan, and then also from the Christian Parenting Handbook in number 2. Let me bring those up a little closer so you can see them. In the Action Plan book, I'm teaching parents how to solve any problem in any child's life at any age. Move the child from point A to point B by identifying a target quality to overcome the challenge they have, and so on. 12 meetings with the child. It's a curriculum. It's 12 audio sessions. And then, so that's one line of curriculum that you might consider. That's the number 4. And then the other one, the Christian Parenting Handbook, contains 50 short chapters of ideas to work with children. I've only shared a couple of them here in this webinar. But the companion guide takes all kinds of scripture and ties it into our family and our dynamic in parenting. I love doing this. I love working with families and working in their relationships to try to strengthen them. I think it's a fascinating and very fulfilling way to work with people. I just want to encourage you, if you know someone who might be interested in doing what I do, that is coaching families, I'm starting a new program this fall, September. If you're listening to this on the video, then it's September of 2016. I'm going to train coaches, and these coaches are going to be in an apprentice program with me for 8 weeks, and each one has to be working with another parent, get another parent they can, and those parent problems are going to be brought by the coaches into a group. I'm going to be troubleshooting those problems through the coaches along with the other coaches, and we're going to solve problems. It comes with a notebook, a huge notebook of resources that you can use. We'll use 4 textbooks from books that Joanne Miller and I have written to help guide you through the process. You'll watch 24 different videos, 10-minute videos to train you to be a coach. And then those coaches will be on our website so people can get help in that way. All right, let me do this. I'm going to stop the sharing of the screen, and that'll give me an opportunity to look at questions and answers. Questions. I'll try to provide some answers. All right, so Jamie says, how do you address child number 1 saying it's all because child number 2, child number 3, etc.? A common problem that children have is they blame the problem on others. And the first thing I would say is to child number 2, to child number 1 is you're right. Child number 2 and child number 3 often do the wrong thing. And so let me ask you a question. It's not, sibling conflict always has a percent. You know, if you have a percentage, you have 100% is the whole. And what percentage would you say is your brothers? Would you say like 90% is your brothers and maybe 10% are you, or 25% for you and 75? How much do you think is your part of the problem? Would you say it's, and some kids will say, well, I think it's 50-50. Well, if that means half the problem is yours, half for your brother. Or maybe you think it's mostly your brother. Okay, I'll take that. You think your brother's 90% of the problem and you think you're 10%. Okay, good. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 100% of the responsibility for your 10% of the problem. If you could take 100% of your responsibility for your 10% of the problem, and you can start developing skills in your little area of weakness. Because if we could help you be stronger, then you'll be able to deal with your brother's issues or your sister's issues. We want to help child number 2 and child number 3 be more successful. You're a key to that. If you apparently think you're strong. So if you're strong, Romans 15:1 says, then you want to bear with the failings of the weak, not to think about yourself. So let's practice that. Let's look for ways. That's what I'm trying to do too. I'm trying to be the strong one here in our home, and I could use your help. So since you think you're strong, let's try to work on this together. So in that way, we're trying to help children take responsibility for their small part. Now, sometimes children are resistant to this and they like to blame other people. And let me just explain to you why they do it so you understand the heart a little bit more. Inside the heart, God has placed a conscience. I don't have time to share with you all the scripture about this right now, but the conscience prompts us to do what's right, deal with wrongs, be honest, and care about others. Let me step back now. Every heart has a conscience. The conscience provides promptings. They are feelings that you have. For example, when you do the right thing, you have this feeling of obligation. Oh, I need to do this. That's the conscience saying, I need to, or I should. That's what the conscience does. It tells you that. Oh, I need to do this, or I should. In the dealing with wrongs section of the conscience, as it prompts you, you have a feeling of guilt. It's an uncomfortable feeling that I may have done the wrong thing. Children don't like to feel that feeling of guilt, and so they try to get rid of the feeling by doing some different things. One is they blame. That's what we're talking about here. Other times they rationalize. Well, if you would have seen all the problems I have, you'd understand why I do what I do. That's rationalizing, or justifying, or defending oneself, or just getting angry. All of those are ways to offload the guilt so that I don't have to face the guilt myself. That's a problem. Children who blame the problem on others all the time need to be asked this question. You're having a problem in there with your brother. I know that he's doing part of the problem, you're doing part of the problem. What did you do wrong in that situation? We'll talk about what your brother did in a moment, but I just want to know, what did you do wrong? Then we all want to ask another question. Okay, what could you do differently in that situation? That's helping a child take responsibility for his part of the problem. So I would just suggest that using that approach to help children take responsibility is often a helpful way to address it. And sibling conflict is a great way to do this. The conscience isn't satisfied ultimately by blaming, rationalizing, and justifying. The conscience is satisfied when someone says, I was wrong, will you forgive me? Or I was wrong, I'm taking responsibility. By the way, the child who's always blaming the problem on another person becomes the victim in family life. They feel like a victim. And when they feel like a victim, they lose something very important. They lose control. I have no control over this. If everybody else would change, I would be fine. When you take responsibility for yourself, you have control. I can control my part of the problem. I can be an influencer here. And so Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. They're the ones who take responsibility for the situation. They come in and do something about it. If you're always blaming, then you feel like a victim. And that's a sad place to be, because then the only way that life can be better for you is if other people change. God doesn't want us to be victims. He wants us to take responsibility for ourselves. Then we, along with God's grace and help in our lives, can make changes. And when we do, good things can happen in the relationship and in our own hearts as we grow to be stronger to handle the challenges that we face in family life. Let's go to another question. This anonymous person says, our 7-year-old daughter is much more easily angered or jealous, pushed over the edge than 5-year-old son. Excuse me. Just got another question. Bounces that one out of the way. Okay. 7-year-old daughter is much more easily angered. Okay, so 7-year-old is the one that's more emotional than our 5-year-old son. He's easier, more generous, seems to have a kinder heart. Because of this, we seem to correct our daughter much more often, feeling like we're too critical with her, which keeps her feeling like she fails and can't do the right thing. Okay. So I like the question because you're being sensitive to a very important concern. And that concern is what I call the red zone. We want to work with kids in the middle. The red zone's a football illustration. So if you want to know what the football illustration is, ask somebody who understands football. Okay, but anyway, the football illustration is where we're playing in the playing field. The red zone's within the 20-yard line, and if you're playing defense, that's when you change your strategy. So you have your red zone defense is what you have. Now, I think in parenting, we have 2 red zones. One over here is anger. If you get in the anger side, kids, we want to be careful they don't develop bitterness. In fact, Ephesians says, do not exasperate your children. Okay, so we want to be careful about anger. And on the other side is sadness. And I think that's what you're looking for here, because you're saying maybe she'll become too discouraged in sadness. That's the danger over here. The red zones are important because we want to be on guard about them, but we can't be afraid of them. Because many times children have to go into the red zones in order to feel the pain in order to change. Remember, the heart is where we're changing. Emotions are in the heart. And sometimes children have difficult tendencies that affect the emotions. So making changes affects emotions. That's why Paul says in 2 Corinthians, he says, there is a sorrow that leads to repentance. In other words, sometimes moving into the red zones are beneficial because they move us back. Now, here's why your question is so valuable. Because you want her, it says, feeling like we're too critical with her, which keeps her feeling like she fails and can't do the right thing. The key thing that you can do for your daughter who fails a lot is provide her the path to get back into the playing field. If children go into the red zone, that's maybe okay. We have to be cautious about it. But we're not afraid of it, their emotions. And if they have to go into the red zone in order to make some changes, we're okay with that. But our job is to provide them hope. And hope is going to be, the way you provide hope is with a plan and new ideas. It's one way that you can develop hope. And so as people get plans and new ideas, they feel hopeful about that. I was working with a family in my office here just before this webinar, and I was working with a dad and a mom and a daughter, an older daughter, a young lady. And at the end of our time, she started crying. And I said to her, those tears are happy tears. And she nodded yes. And I said, I can tell. You know why you're happy? It's because you have hope. I've given you some hope today, and you've identified some hope with your plan, because we created this plan for her using some of the tools that I referred to earlier. And so she has hope moving forward. So you want your daughter to have hope, and that's with the plan. She needs to make some changes. So firmness is important. Firmness may push her into the red zone, but try to help her have a plan so she can back into the playing field. Here's what you need to do. I know you're sad and you're disappointed, but I'm helping you. I'm coming alongside you to help you to move forward. So helping children to be able to get out of the red zones and move forward is important. And I'm really glad you're asking the question, because it's a question that we all need to be able to address. Parenting is a challenge. Being able to work with all of this can be require some real wisdom to know exactly what to do. Let me just say, there's not just one right way to parent, and I hope I'm not saying that today. There's a lot of good ways to parent, and we need to be wise and understand our child. Shauna asked this question: how do you help kids to own the conflict resolution process so they begin to engage it on their own rather than being directed in each instant? My kids are 14, 12, and 9. Okay, thanks for telling me the ages of your kids. That helps me a lot. So here's what I would do. You want kids to own the process. I really like that. So here's one of the things I would suggest. You say to two kids, let's say your 14 and 9-year-old are into this. I might say, okay, you two guys need to get on the couch, and I want you to try to work through this. And if you need some help, I'll coach you, but let's see if you can solve this problem. Or when we talked about the plan earlier, a 14-year-old needs to have some good conflict resolution strategies. When he gets angry or she gets angry, then the anger indicates that there's a problem. So we must pull back on the anger, but that still leaves the problem. And the conflict resolution strategies are the solutions that we bring to that process. And so I would ask the 14-year-old, what are your solutions when you're angered by your brother? What can you do? What are you going to say to yourself? What are you going to do to move forward? I want to know what your plans are. Now, I can give you some new ones. We can look up YouTube videos on conflict management. I can show you how they're teaching employees to deal with conflict. I can show you what customer service videos that look like, and you can bring those home and use them with your brother and sister. So, but I would like you to develop a plan. So I think it starts with helping children to develop their own plan and try to engage them in a way that helps them to be able to use that plan accordingly. Then we might say to a child, we might pull them out and say, hey, are you working your plan? Do I need to give you a plan here, or can you try to work your plan? So we're continually trying to move back to teach our children how to manage themselves. Let me just refer you to one of our books that I mentioned earlier, but I didn't mention it. It was thrown up, but I didn't really tell you about it. It's the Motivate Your Child book. The Motivate Your Child is a book about internal motivation and helping children manage themselves instead of having to rely on parents to manage them. So Motivate Your Child is about internal motivation and how to do that. You might find that book helpful. Maybe you already have it, but that book really addresses the internal motivation in children and helps them move forward in that way. But they have, if they're continually relying on parents to break up the fight, then yes, we have a problem. We have to empower children to move forward. So we're going to call one child out and say, you need to work on the plan. And I'm going to send you back in a moment. I want to know what your plan is before I send you back in, because when you're working your plan, I'm going to pull your brother out of there and work with him or her. Another question we have here, anonymous person says, my son has ADHD and is very impulsive. When he's in a calm state, he is great at coming up with a plan and can be very loving and kind. Most of the time when he's in the situation, he reacts so quickly that he's unable to remember the plan, and by that time I get him out of the situation, the damage has already been done to his younger sister, her property, etc., because he turns so quickly. Any suggestions? Yeah, I got lots of suggestions. These are the children I work with a lot. And I have 6 books that I use in this process. In fact, I'll just point out how I do this. If you go to our website, in fact, I think I can show it to you. Let me show it to you real quick. Share the screen. Let's do this screen. And now let's go to, let's get rid of this. Oh, that's my question and answer thing. Let's go over here to biblical parenting.org. And if you go down to the bottom of our website pages, we have a sitemap. And at the bottom of the sitemap, or in the sitemap, you have this ADD, ADHD. If you go there, I give you some ideas here that I think, first of all, are really helpful. You can listen to a podcast I do on that specific. And then there's a bunch of illustrations here. And a strategic reading plan that you can download that takes you through these 6 books and tells you right here why those books help with these kids. Now, I'm going to tell you some ideas that are in there, but you can check those out as well. Here's what we want to do. The problem is impulsivity. So there's 3 problems that we're dealing with ADHD. One is focus, the other is high energy, and the third is impulsivity. Those 3 problems create secondary problems, like this child has to be corrected a lot, can't follow instructions well, has school issues, and one of them has to do with conflict in relationships. And another is that they act inappropriately and when it comes to social dynamics. All those are secondary problems. So having a multifaceted approach is very important for addressing those challenges that the children face. But when we're dealing with children with attention deficit disorder, part of their therapy is living with other people. So with kids who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, we have to break things into very small pieces. and we have to give them very simple solutions. So we have to monitor them closely. If your brother does something wrong, here's what you do. You don't, because if you reach out and touch him, you've done the wrong thing. I'm going to have to call you out. Here's when your brother does the wrong thing, and I would suggest this at first. I want you to come to me right away so I can coach you. Okay, and I'm going to give you an idea of how to correct your brother or get back what you want or whatever. So we're trying to get involved more in the process by stopping the process earlier. Now, you're right. He's done some damage after the fact. So if he's done the damage after the fact, we want to use correction to try to build some new pathways in the brain. With children with ADHD, it's a brain issue. And what I try to do is I try to use repeated patterns over and over again with these kids to build new patterns in the brain to help them address challenges. One of the ways we do that is through correction. Oh, wrong response. You need to go sit down, take a break, settle down. When you're ready, come back and see me. And these children sometimes can move pretty quickly back to come back. You know, they were just impulsive, so they're sitting there for 30 seconds and they're ready to come back. When the child comes back, I want to ask them 3 questions and make a statement, because these 3 questions and a statement we call a positive conclusion. Help this child kind of role play in his own mind about how to handle the situation, what went wrong. This helps build the grooves. This is part of what builds the grooves in the brain, so the child will be able to handle this differently next time. Okay? What did you do wrong is the first question. Why was that wrong is the second question. What are you going to do differently next time? Helps the child plan for the next times of life. And then we say, go ahead and try again. I'll say those one more time. What did you do wrong? Why was that wrong? What are you going to do differently next time? And then go ahead and try again. And now we tell the child, when we say, what are you going to do differently next time? We want a very specific plan. This isn't like, I'll be nice next time. No, when he grabs from you, what are you going to do? You might give him some choices. You can talk about it and you might even give him the exact words. I don't like that. If you want, it depends how old the child is. So you can give exact words. I don't like that. Or you need to come and talk to me right away. So I'm going to send you in right now again. Or we might even do a role play. Let's bring the other child in here, his younger sister. And sister, go ahead and take the CD out of your brother's hand again. And let's see your brother respond the right way. So we may role play, because what we're doing now, using a multifaceted approach with children who have attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is what we're doing is we're building new pathways in the brain for them. The challenge they have is a brain issue. And my whole approach to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and attention deficit disorder is a character-based approach. That doesn't mean we're opposed to other strategies. We're just saying that's what we add to the process. If you're working with a child with special needs, such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I'm sure you're looking for as many solutions as you can get. And the solutions we bring to the table are very effective in helping children who have these challenges in their lives. Well, let me do this. Let me come back to the screen here, and I'm going to pray in just a moment again. Before I do, I want to draw attention to a couple of things. One is the slide deck that I put on, that I used today, is available for you in that link that I put on the website. It's biblicalparenting.org/webinar. /webinar after our website, biblicalparenting.org/webinar. The slide deck is there in PDF form, so you can go through the slides. I added the Bible verses at the beginning after I created that and put it on the web. So the Bible verses I shared at the beginning are not on there, but the plan of 9 steps is there in case you want that and you want to share it with someone else. Feel free to do that. Secondly, if you want the recording of this, you'll find it in the member library, along with lots of other resources that are only provided to members. And members pay $25 a month to support our ministry. So if that interests you, we would love to have your support. It helps us do what we do to help parents. That's our life calling for Joanne Miller and me. And we, frankly, we need the financial support that you might be willing to offer. So we thank you for your willingness to do that. And we bless you with a lot of different resources. So if you'd consider membership, that would be great. I won't be doing any webinars for a while. I've been doing them every month for a while, but I'm going to stop doing them for a little bit as I focus on some other things, especially this coaching program that I'm starting. If you know anybody who's interested in becoming a biblical parenting coach, go to this link. It's not public yet, but it will be in the next week when Ed Miller takes off and runs with this whole thing and starts the promotion of it in the next few days. The website to go to this to tell the people about our coaching program is biblicalparenting.org/coach. So when you go to /coach, you'll learn all about the coaching program. And I'm mentoring and apprenticing people in a small group who each have a parent they're working with, and I'm going to train those parents to work with others and then put those coaches, after they've been trained, on our website. Other people can find them in their area. I just want to multiply myself. The coaching ministry that I have with families is very successful, and I'm confident now I can pass it on to others and train other coaches to do that. I think it'd be great for any family to know how to work with kids the way I've outlined it. You get this thick notebook, you get watching videos, you get all this training material, and I'm working with you individually and in a group for 8 weeks to make that happen. So if that interests you, you can check that out. Also, check out our website at biblicalparenting.org for other resources that may be helpful for you. Let's take a moment and just turn this over to the Lord and ask for his guidance. Lord, this is a challenging area of family life. We want harmony. We know that to be a successful family and to engage in the purpose of our family, that is to help others, not just to strengthen ourselves, that we have to have certain things down. And one of those is harmony in relationships. And when we don't have that harmony, it distracts us from our purpose as a family to bless others and bless other families. So I ask, Lord, that you would give these parents wisdom and these young people wisdom to deal with the conflict that exists in their home now. That you enable them as a family to be strong so they can help others and bear with the failings of the weak, as Romans 15:1 says. Pray for wisdom for parents and for soft hearts on the part of young people and children. Lord, I pray that you'd provide solutions that work and you'd bring harmony into these homes. I ask for a special blessing, a measure of your blessing on these families. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much, folks, for joining me in this webinar.